We're a patient bunch.
So glad to hear that. Well, welcome to the Superintendents Roundtable for January 2021. We are ARSA, the Arizona Rural Schools Association, and we are here to support you in your rural work. I am Melissa Sadorf. I'm the superintendent of the Stanfield Elementary School District located in Pinal County, and I also serve on your ARSA Executive Board as the president-elect.
And I am Sean Rickert. I am the superintendent at Pima Unified School District over here in Graham County in eastern Arizona. I also am on the ARSA Executive Board as the representative for Southeast Arizona and the Advocacy Coordinator for the association, which means that I'm the one that people seem to turn to when they have questions about what the heck these people are thinking down in Phoenix. It really isn't fair because nobody knows.
You do a good job. You do a good job. So we've got a loosely packed agenda. I know that we've got an hour to spend with you, and here are some of the things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to specifically give you ARSA's advocacy goals for the upcoming year. We're going to spend some time talking about the Request to Speak platform, which is really going to play a big part in this year's legislative session, given the pandemic restrictions that are currently in place to access those buildings. We're going to get some tips from Sean for how to interact with your legislators and other public officials. And we'll talk a little bit about the ARSA Policy Action Tool. Sean's going to give us some updates that you need to be aware of, especially if you had a change in representation in your legislative district. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. If you do have questions throughout, please don't hesitate to throw those questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go. So Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you real quick, and let's talk about the advocacy goals for this year.
All right, so we basically have 3 advocacy goals. One of them is focused on action that we expect to see at the state board. One is focused on action that we generally encourage at the legislature. And then the third is really focused on the way that ARSA wants to be a support to you as rural education leaders. So go to the next slide, Melissa. All right, so goal number 1, these goals have been with us for quite some time, and they've evolved slightly, but they've largely been pretty stable over the last 4 years. And one of the things that first drew me to advocacy for rural schools was a recognition that there's something fundamentally biased about the way that Arizona grades schools. I was in my second or third year as a superintendent, and I was talking to a gentleman at the department, and I asked him, I said, why is it that, when you look at the distribution of high schools in Arizona, there were only 2 of them at the time that were outside of Maricopa County? I said, is it that nobody outside of Maricopa County knows how to run a high school? Or is it that there's a fundamental bias in how we're grading high schools that favors those in the metropolitan areas? And he said, that you're probably right. There probably is some bias, and we need to work on that. And within a year, we'd had a change in SPI, and he'd moved over to another institution. And I realized that really we had to start looking for ways to advocate for an accountability system that was fair in the way that it assessed rural schools. We're a long way from getting fair, but we keep banging away at trying to keep it from getting worse. And that's one of the things that I do. I sit on the Accountability Technical Advisory Committee, and I've spoken at countless state board meetings to try to say, look, in a rural context, things like N count, things like weighting matter much more than they do in a Tempe or a Tucson or a Mesa context, where you're dealing with very large numbers of students, large subgroups, all of those things. So one of the things that we push for is making sure that the accountability system is fair. With goal number 2 really focuses more on the legislature. And again, back quite a few years back, I was talking back when Don German was the executive director. He and I were talking, and we said, we know what we need. We know what's missing when it comes to trying to run a rural school in Arizona. We've got people with heart, we've got good communities, family support, we've got all those things. What we don't have enough money. And so we decided that one of the things that ARSA's advocacy effort really needed to focus on was how can we help to ensure that every time an opportunity to bring more money to the table and to give us greater freedom in how we use that money comes up, we make sure people know how much it matters. And so, that included support for the 1.5 cent sales tax. That included support for, loosening the restrictions on how supplemental funding like Classroom Site Fund is used by schools. We'll talk a little bit later about a bill that's going to be heard next Tuesday in the House Education Committee that would address that. Actually, Senate Education Committee. They meet at the same time, so it's almost the same thing. But those are some of the things that are going on. So we as an organization have been aggressive. Now, with that said, when 208 was on the ballot, there was a lot of contention over whether or not that was the right way to do it. And so back in September, we had a webinar, and I hope you guys had the chance to attend that, where we gave each side the opportunity to share the reasons why there should or shouldn't be support for Proposition 208. So, but that's been one of our top priorities is how can we bring more money to the table. Goal number 3 really has to do with how ARSA goes about doing advocacy. I'm sure most or all of you are members of ASBA, or your districts are. You're probably members of ASA. ASA and ASBA and ASBO have very strong advocacy apparatuses. Their focus is on hiring and employing lobbyists who go to the Capitol to communicate with elected officials about how policies should be formulated to support public education. ARSA's approach is different. Our approach is we want to provide you as the educational leader with the information so that you know when you need to step forward to make the difference for your schools. It's a little more time intensive on your part, but it can be 100 times more effective because legislators, state board members, even people in the governor's office, when they hear from superintendents, that's when they say, okay, now I understand something I didn't understand before. So goal 3 is to get the information out there and to encourage that communication and those relationships between education leaders and policymakers. So what's the big deal? What's the big deal with advocacy? It's all about relationships. We in education, we understand the importance of relationships because we know how important that teacher-student relationship is. We know how important that teacher-parent relationship is. That's where things get done, is where people know each other, they trust each other, they listen to each other, and they can make a difference. And with advocacy, it's the same thing. And so your legislators are going to need to get to know who you are. And that's something that can happen during the interim between sessions. It can happen during the session when you see something and you can provide them with some facts and some details that can help them to make a good decision. I always want to be in a position where you're trying to help them figure out what they need. Sometimes they don't know what they need, but we're there to help them. All right. So one of the ways you can do that is through the request to speak system. I'm going to let Melissa tell you a little bit more about that.
All right. Thanks, Sean. I know that there are a few of you that are on this webinar that already know how to use this system. But I think it's important that we put out as much information about it as possible, because like I said, there's going to be limited access to the legislative sessions this year by the public. We're not going to be able to go down and speak at a subcommittee, for example. So the request to speak system really is going to be important during this session, so that you're able to advocate with whatever stories and opinions you want to weigh in. What you must do in order to use this system is to register as a user. And this is still an in-person activity. You have to go into the Capitol building and register at a kiosk. Able to do that for whatever reason, please let us know. And our executive director, Wes Brownfield, once he has your contact information, can then go to that kiosk, register for you, and get you your credentials, so that then you're able to use the system. Please make sure that if you have not yet registered, you take advantage of that offer for assistance from him.
Now, one thing I'd interject there: if you've ever been registered, you're still registered, as long as you can remember your passport or your password.
Yeah, and if you can't, you can reset it.
You have to do it every year.
Yeah. Thank you. Good point. The website for the request to speak system is the azledge.gov system. So that's where you're going to go for all of your legislative needs. When you get there, this is the screen that you're going to get. And if you hover over that legislative information tab, you'll have a pull down menu. One of the things on there is request to speak. There's also a text search that you can do if you're looking for a particular piece of legislation or a bill that's moving. But request to speak is right under that legislative information tab. Once you get on there, you're going to click on the sign in page at the top. And from there, you're able to view those upcoming agendas by committee. Remember that there are multiple committees that are having committee work during a session. So you're going to want to make sure that you're hitting the correct committee that your bill that you're tracking is in. Whether it's the education committee, sometimes you're going to have things in appropriations or rules that you may be tracking for education. And then you're also going to want to determine, is this something that's happening in the Senate or is it happening in the House? And you're able to toggle between those two houses. Once you click the sign on tab, you're going to be directed to your login. And this is where, if you don't have an account, you're going to get those credentials so that you can create an account. And then signing in, once you have them, is pretty easy. You're going to put in your email and password, and then you're going to sign on. Once you sign on, this is what the screen looks like. There's, again, two things that you can see. The first is that request to speak system. And then the bill status inquiry, again, if you have a bill number that you'd like to search by to see where in status it is, you're able to do that through that bill status inquiry tab. But we're going to focus on the request to speak tab. So after you hit that button, request to speak, you have a My Request page that is going to track the bills that you're taking a look at, or things that you have taken a position on already. So once you've taken a position, this is where you can track to see where the bills are in terms of action on them. Right now, you'll notice that there's nothing in terms of bills that are on there, and that's because I haven't signed up to track any bills right now. So, and actually this is old data. The other thing to keep in mind is that you want to make sure you're hitting the right session. This upcoming session is session 55. So you're in 55th legislative session. So make sure that you are correctly indicating which legislative session you want to be in and tracking. So once you hit you have a request to speak account set up, you're navigating by the committee that you want. Typically it's going to be education. You can search by a phrase, you can search by a bill number. If you are already aware of what the bill number is, you can type it in there and hit search. And you're going to then get the bills that are being heard by that committee. If there are no bills that come up it's not currently on an agenda. You can track it a different way, but you're not able to do any kind of request to speak, signing in on a bill, either to oppose or to support, unless it's on an agenda. So be aware that it must be on an agenda for you to take action on it. So you have your bill, you've identified it, you see that it's on an agenda, you can identify that it has been set for any kind of action. So the next thing you're going to do under that far right tab is you're going to select the bill and you're going to add a request. That's going to initiate the page where you're then able to take a position or against a bill. Typically, unless you're a lobbyist, you're going to sign in as self. So who are you representing? You're going to be representing self. The drop-down menu. Keep in mind, you can also go neutral on a bill. You don't have an opinion one way or another, but you want to note that you have signed in about it and you're tracking it. You'll also notice that there are a couple of pieces of information to make sure that you're on the right bill. On the right there, you have the agenda date, and you also have a description. So just make sure before you hit that save or submit button that you're on the right bill. You can't undo, revise, but you can't undo. Joetta, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm actually going back a few slides.
Okay.
When you talk about Wes going in to sign in for people, I was wanting to do that for some of our senior members and board members as well. What information will I need to take with me to do that?
You need their email address, and you need to tell me it's email address, and then I believe their physical address. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. So mailing address, mailing address, and then you can create a password for them, and they can go back in and update it once they're in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, last thing that you want to pay attention to here is, do you wish to speak? Right under where you are either supporting or you're coming in against a bill. If you want to speak, remember that's the only way that you're going to be able to be heard this session in legislative committee. So you're going to want to hit yes, and then you need to make sure that you're available. No, yes, Sean?
Actually, on the screen currently, there's a yes, no, if necessary, and then there's a, what does it say, remote?
Remote.
I mean,
yeah.
There is a
or
option,
is it virtual option?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the language is, but let's see.
Well, you want to do a screen share? You know what? While I'm talking, why don't you pull that up and then
I'm on a different computer.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. We'll figure it out. But yes, please make sure that if you do want to speak to a specific bill, that you let them know that you want to do that. And then you're going to hit submit. Once you have hit submit, you're able to also, I should say, put a comment in if you're not planning on speaking. They can read that into the record. Everything that is on this page as a position, who you are, your position, and then any comment that you make goes into the public record. And then once you have hit submit, you're then able to see where you are in terms of your tracking for your bills that you're taking positions on. All right. Any questions besides the couple that I've already had? Joetta, is your hand still raised? Okay, just making sure. Right, and I would encourage you, if you have people in your organization that are not yet on the request to speak system, it's going to be an interesting year, legislatively speaking, and I would encourage you to ensure that they have an understanding of how this works so that they are able to then advocate for your school system area. There's also, just so that you have some more detailed information than what I just gave you, there's a manual that you can download. It's on the Request to Speak tab, and it's a PDF that you can then take a look at. There's a lot more detail than I just gave you. All right, and with that, Sean, I'm turning it back over to you.
All right. So some of this is going to be really, old news, but like I mentioned earlier, if you go to the next slide, it's all about developing relationships. It's all about communication, and how you communicate with your legislator will largely affect or determine, how effective you can be in your advocacy effort. And we know that right now, because of the pandemic and because of all the rules they've put in place, it's kind of complicated. Face-to-face communication, which used to be, hands down the best way to communicate with your legislator. Well, now there's lots of obstacles. So there's some large fences that have been put up to keep demonstrators away. There's masks. There's social distancing, and so our ability to get a hold of a legislator and talk to them face to face is limited. Written communication is easy. It's easy to send an email, but I'll tell you, how many emails you get in a day. Legislators during session are getting bombarded with emails. So if you have information that you're going to send to them and you want them to get it, you need to type the email, send the email, and then you need to make a phone call. And you talk to their staffer, introduce yourself. Always make sure you ask how they're doing. During the session, their worlds can get kind of crazy. They really appreciate it, just taking a breath and saying how, yes, they're okay, or, gosh, this is hard, or, but take a moment, and then tell them why you're emailing the senator representative, and then tell them what the subject line of the email was. So make sure that you keep track of that so that you can tell them that. Then they can go in, find that email, flag it, so that when the legislator is going through, that's one of the emails that they're sure to see. And that can really help to get your written communication where you want it to go.
Sean, Joanna had a question.
Oh, sure. What's your question, Joanna?
No, I actually didn't. When I was taking some notes, I hit my keyboard and it unmuted me and it raised my hand. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's all right. That's all right. So, and one of the things that I always emphasize, and we can go on to the next slide here, but one of the things that I always emphasize is ask them how you can help them. It seems like a little thing, but if you think about it, they're in a position where from sunup till sundown and well past sundown, they have people constantly asking them for things, constantly telling them what they should do, telling them what they need. And if you stop and say, okay, how can, what are you trying to get done that helps public education, and how can I help you to get that done? You don't have to do it because lots of times it may be a really bad idea, but taking that time to really, express that interest in them and that willingness to, they'll remember that you were willing to help them out. And if you did something that you're willing to follow through on, and, and then, you copy them on the information that maybe you sent to somebody else or that kind of thing, that goes a long way. And it really does help to build those relationships, and they can be very durable relationships, because legislators, like I said, they have lots of people coming at them. But if you're one of the people that's coming at them to help them, then they're going to remember you. So, all right. So what's happening? Uh-oh. Okay, this is the wrong presentation, Melissa. Isn't it? This is the one I'm on.
So
we only have,
stop
we only have
sharing.
14. We only have 14 freshmen in the house. So, can I share?
Yeah, you're a co-host.
I could if I was, yeah, I can. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can.
How many iterations of this presentation did we do? A few.
Yeah, a couple of them. All right, I'm sharing.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I can do this. I've done technology before.
I've heard this.
This isn't my first webinar, you know. All right, where am I? I am. Been through all those slides already.
25, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, session update. So we are not headed, we're in, believe it or not, we are actually in a new session. We've got a bunch of people there with us, 14 freshmen in the house. That freshmen, you know, just like freshmen in high school, they're new to it. These are people that were just elected last November. Some of them are brand new to politics. Some of them are not so new to politics. You get some folks like in LD6, Brenda Barton, who lost to Blackman, I believe 2 years ago or 4 years ago, and back in 18, because he was a freshman back in 18. And then this go around, she ran again and was able to, who did she defeat? I don't know. Anyway, so there's people like Brenda Barton. Frank Pratt was one that was in the Senate last session. Now he's back in the House. Andrea D'Alessandro, same thing. But we do have, you know, quite a few now. Keep in mind, if you're looking at 2 years ago, we had 25 freshmen. You know, this year we only have 14. So we have a smaller group of people, and freshmen are important for lots of reasons. We'll talk about in just a second. On the Senate side, remember there are half as many senators as there are representatives, although that could change at any minute, apparently. No, right now we have 8 freshmen in the Senate, but only 2 of those are new. Christine Marsh, who was a teacher who defeated Kate Brophy-McGee in LD 28, and Kirsten Engel, who's a Democrat. So we have these 2 new senators that haven't held public office before that I know of. And I'm not completely sure I'm right about Kirsten, but we'll go with it. So why are freshmen important? Why are we talking about them? Well, primarily because, you know, they're new. They got into public office because they're looking to make a difference. They're always looking to get more information. They don't necessarily have that sense that they know everything yet. And so those are really good people. They're also the ones that are going to be heavily targeted by the special interests, the mommy lobby, the pro charter folks, the ESA advocates. You know, they're going to be looking to talk to these people as well, to help them understand why, you know, vouchers are good and public schools are a waste of money. We have to counter that by being engaged with them. Other critical incidents, we had quite a few education related items on the ballot, but the biggest one, and by that I'm talking about bonds and overrides, and many of them did well, and many of them got really close. But by far the biggest thing is we've got, you know, Proposition 208 that has overshadowed all of it, passing by a very slim margin. But also, actually, it wasn't that slim, but but now it's leading to a series of lawsuits and other types of controversy over how the money can be spent, over whether or not all of the I's are properly dotted and the T's are properly crossed, over whether or not there's a usurpation of the legislative prerogative. All of these questions are going to have to be answered before we see any money. In the meantime, it means that we've given a strong stick to those who would say that, you know, well, good, see, public schools already have all the money they need. There's no reason to add additional funding in the general budget, which is the last thing we needed. So, and then the third point about this legislature right now is we have very small majorities. You know, 1 seat in the House, 1 seat in the Senate majorities. which once upon a time would mean that you'd have more bipartisan efforts to get things done because any one Republican in either house could basically say, no, I'm going to side with the Democrats and you're not going to be able to get this done. In the era of tribal politics, it actually leads to a higher level of radicalization because so many of our seats of so many of our races in Arizona are determined based on the primary. So you've got Republicans running against Republicans or Democrats running against Democrats. And if you engage in bipartisan politics, when you get to the next primary, there's going to be somebody who's, further to the right or further to the left who's going to say, well, they're not a true Republican. They're not a true Democrat. I would be a better representative of our party. And so it tends, we're seeing it more of a pull to the right and to the left and less of a pull to the middle. All right, how are we doing, Melissa?
We're doing good. We've got about half an hour left, so you're right.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so when it comes to advocacy, in the past, I have developed a advocacy tool that basically, provided all of the information on all of the bills. And what I found is that it largely duplicated a lot of the things that you can do in that AZ Ledge request to speak bill position format. And actually, they do it much better than I ever could. And so I was spending a lot of effort to try to duplicate something that was already out there. I'm entirely too lazy to want to do that. And so what we're going to do this year is going to be a little bit different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out an email. I'll send it to Wes, and he'll forward it. And in that email, we'll identify the bills that are on the agenda for the next week's House committee hearings in education, and any education related bills that are moving through other committees, so that you then can have the opportunity to reach out to your legislator. We have information that we'll get up on the website, on the advocacy page on the ARSA website, to help you to identify which district you're in if you don't know, as well as who your representatives are and how to get a hold of them. But again, a lot of that information is already available, and so it'll basically just be a matter of generating links. But for example, both, like I mentioned, both House and Senate education meet on Tuesday. They both actually meet on Tuesday afternoon. It used to be they met on different days of the week, which was really convenient. And apparently, for some reason, Senator Boyer decided, I guess he really liked it when House education was on Tuesday afternoons. And so now that he's the chairman of Senate education, he's going for Tuesday afternoons. I don't know why. But next Tuesday in the Senate, we've got a bill. This is kind of an important bill, Senate Bill 1139, which is classroom site fund distribution. That's the title of it. But what it does is it collapses the buckets, retains the flexibility in M&O spending, and actually increases that a little bit so that you can use classroom site funds for everything from voluntary full-day kindergarten to student supports. There's a long list, and I'll like I said, we'll get an email together that'll go out to say, okay, here's the things, and with a link to the actual bill itself. This is sponsored by the chair. The reason, and a lot of these bills that we're seeing towards the beginning of this session are bills that were picked up that had gone through the process last year. Senate Bill 1139 was a Sylvia Allen bill last year, went through the Senate Education Committee, went through the floor of the Senate, was set to go to the House, and then COVID happened. House Bill 2123 is very similar. This is a bill that Representative Udall, the chairwoman of the House Education Committee is sponsoring, and this would provide fourth-year funding for CTEDs, and it will be taken up by the House Education Committee again on Tuesday. It does exactly what we'd want it to do, provides funding for freshmen. There's also a bill that she's taken up that's kind of a partner bill with this one that addresses the ADM question for CTED funding. So what do these show us? Well, they show us that we're picking up where we left off with a lot of things, and we're moving them forward, and that's good to see. So again, a lot of this we've already covered as far as the vision for advocacy. Our vision is that we're here to provide you with the information so that you can make a decision and you can guide your board and your staff and your community, because it's not the same. Proposition 208 was a great example of this. In some communities there was a ton of support for Proposition 208. In some communities there was a lot of concern about how Proposition 208 might affect small businesses, how it might affect education funding in a broader context. So our goal is to provide you with the information that you need. So we're done a little bit early.
Sean, I have one thing before we take any questions, and that is when they put out the agendas for the week, one of the things that you'll see on there, well, one of the things you won't see anymore is a tab to just click into a live meeting. They are going to be putting out a link to each live session 30 minutes before the session starts. And that link will be available on the agenda that they post directly before the meeting. So just be aware you won't be able to pop in and out of meeting rooms with the tabs on the AZ Ledge system like you used to be able to do. You've got to have that link in order to get into the meeting room. So just be aware of that and take a look at where those things are. If you can't find them, let Sean or I know, and we can certainly make sure that we direct you to the right place. But it's a little bit different this year than it has been in the past to actually see one of those sessions happening. I want to make sure I mentioned that.
And why wouldn't it be? Right? So yeah, well, and I think, good. And that Zoom link is important if you want to participate. But I mean, as far as broadcasting to the public, like over the YouTube channel or that kind of thing, I think, I can't remember if they're still doing some of that or not. But
well, there's still archiving for sure, but it is definitely a different way to view those live proceedings than it has been in the past. So.
Absolutely.
All right, so, and with that, questions. What do you got?
What else? What else do you want to see? Thanks, Lori. What do we got in the chat box here?
All right. It was Lori saying thank you. Well, we are available to you throughout the session. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either Sean or I, or even to Wes, so that we can get your questions answered about anything that's happening at the legislature. If you need more information, we're happy to provide that for you so that you're able then to be a better informed advocate for your particular district or your setting.
Just on a totally separate subject, since we've wrapped up and we still have a couple minutes on the clock. I mean, my understanding is that most rural districts are in person. Is that what we're seeing? Kenny's shaking his head.
It's what I see or what I hear around the state.
Well, but
Sean?
Yeah.
I'll just share a little bit. West Central Arizona. We're out here. I'm La Paz County, Yavapai County, right on the corner up here. Wickenburg's traditional, Aguila's traditional, Salome Elementary, Wyndon Elementary, Salome High School are traditional. Actually, Congress Elementary is, they're on site, but I think like 70% of their kids go over there. So that's kind of the 6 or 7 I always check it on locally here. I know Morristown's traditional too, which that's getting closer to the Northwest Valley actually. So yes, I think in my area that's true.
Which is really strange because I mean, you talk to people in the valley, and there was like, well, you know, the presumption is that we're all struggling with remote learning and loss of enrollment because remote learning is just killing districts. But Kenny, what? I'm sorry, and I'm not sure. Maybe go ahead and unmute yourself. Where are you
I'm
from?
from Patagonia, and I'm in Santa Cruz County. So we're basically, well, all the high schools in the county are virtual right now. There's just one K through 8 school that's in person, but the numbers here are not good right now.
Right, right. See, and it's crazy because, to be honest, the numbers here aren't great either. I mean, you know, we're at 24% positivity. You know, my district probably, I think we're at 300 per 100,000 cases. I mean, you know, I mean, just way far away from where all of the metrics say we should be in order to be doing in-person learning. The problem that I've always come up against is I go to the county health department or even go from the state health department. I say, oh, well, how is shutting schools down going to make anything better? I mean, you know, and we've got the advantage. We've been in person all but 2 days since the 17th of August. We had a tremendous spike actually just before Thanksgiving in Graham County and in Pima, and we looked at that and so, well, okay, A, we're running out of substitutes, and B, let's just take the 2 days before Thanksgiving, turn that into a week break, and see if we can't get this back under control. And so we took those 2 days, and by the time we came back in December, the numbers just started coming down again. And we track them on a daily basis. Okay, you know, what's our daily number look like? What's our weekly number look like? You know, where are we at relative to where we were? Where are we at relative to where we want to be? And yeah, it's not good, but we know that the best thing for kids is to be in class with a teacher. You know, our teachers are at their most effective. You know, I mean, I worry about second graders learning to read. You know, I think we all do. And when you take a second grader and put them in a virtual environment, which all too often is packets, now you're counting on parents to do the job. Well, that maybe isn't the best strategy all the time. And so we've kind of, you know, ignored maybe some of the you know, the guidelines in terms of saying, well, you know, should we be, and a lot of that's because, you know, during the time that we've been open, the numbers haven't gone up any more than they have in places where schools have been closed. And so I've never found a convincing argument for why shutting schools down reduces the spread. I understand the theory behind it, but as far as actually seeing it happen, if nothing else, at least when they're here, I know our kids are wearing masks, and I know when they're not here, not so much.
The thing that I would also say, Sean, is that we have staff that we've got to make sure that we are supporting and working with as well. Our concern is not necessarily that, obviously we're concerned about learning loss, but we also are concerned about staffing. So if I have enough teachers that don't feel comfortable coming to school or that are in quarantine or are ill themselves, then I have to then make a decision, how am I going to stay open if I'm filling with parapros or office staff to make sure that there are people that are classroom monitoring. So it's, I don't think there's any one right answer. I think that you hit it right on the nail when you said you've got to take a look at your local context and see what's going on within your district boundaries with your numbers, your metrics, and your community, and what they do or do not want. And then you're working to provide that for them, taking into account that you have the safety of everybody that needs to be foremost in your thought process.
I'd like to share something, and it's a little bit of a different perspective, but first I want to let you know that every single day I'm notified of 3 to 5 more individuals who have tested positive for COVID in my district every single day. And then you multiply that by the number of individuals that have been close contacts and that quarantine period, there's just no way. There's no way we can be open, and we have 12 substitutes for 13 schools. There's just no way. And then a large number of those people who are absent are our bus drivers. We don't have people with CDL licenses ready to drive buses. So that's an issue too. But if I could just tell a quick story, yesterday some of our teachers were participating in PBIS, and they were talking about the change in language to more positive asset-based language that they're using. Now granted, every one of our students has a device distributed by the district, and every one of our families has internet, or probably 98%, because we've worked really hard to make sure that they got internet. We have rebate programs. We have all kinds of things going on for that. But one of the things that a kindergarten teacher noticed is she was talking to the students, providing some direction and instruction to them. And she noticed that one of the parents was working with some other children at the same time. And she heard the very positive language for redirecting student learning from the parent that she had been using. And so if there is a positive, our parents are listening and our parents are learning too. And so I gotta take that as something at least somewhat worthwhile in this whole big mess.
That's awesome, Judd. Thank you. You know, and
Well, and one thing I've seen up in my 2 neighboring districts, up my district, Chevelon Butte, let me organize my thoughts here. Sean, you're exactly right. Probably the safest place for a kid is in school. The only 2 problems with that is, one, we have no control over what happens at home. And it's been my experience, based on what I've seen with some of my neighboring districts up there where I bus my kids, is that there's not a real enforcement of social distancing and hygiene procedures in those schools. While you look on their website, yes, we keep our distance 6 feet apart, and we have cohorts going to lunch, and we all wear masks. But when I sit out in the parking lot in one of our buses and watch the kids come out of school, same thing when I watch them go in, the mask policy becomes elective the moment they step off my bus. So if schools were able to, are willing to enforce proper procedures, mitigation procedures at school, absolutely, that's the best place to have the kids. But when you have schools, and there's a good many of them all the way up in the Navapache County that I know of personally or that I've heard about, are not rigorous when it comes to that. Pardon me. When it comes to that. So, and based on what good Lord, I aspirated to peanut.
can't breathe peanuts.
Yeah, I know it, but I try it all the time. So in answer to your initial question, what do we see? What I see in Gila County, in a good deal of Gila County and a good deal of Navajo County, is schools are open. And yeah, we know there's this thing called a virus out there. It's ripping through their communities, but schools are open. And by the way, we're really angry that the AIA dared to cancel winter sports, so we managed to get that one reversed. Practice is going on, and we give tickets, 2 tickets each to our parents for girls and boys basketball, which will still fill the gym up with people who aren't wearing masks and are cheering for their students, for their children.
And I
So-
thought I was negative going into this thing.
I don't mean to be negative, that's just what I see.
I'm going to cut you both off, and I'm going to ask the rest of the people that are here, are there any other
Okay,
questions about our advocacy work for ARSA for going into this legislative session? I'm pulling you both back.
okay, I'm gonna butt right in again, but I'm going back to advocacy. I think I said it in the chat here. Sean and Melissa won't tell you this because this is not their way, but I've watched them over the years. They have developed really close working relationships with legislature, with the governor's office, to the extent that the governor's office let anybody develop a close relationship with them, and with the state board. So you have in ARSA two people who are superb at advocacy. They know the issues, and more importantly, they get into the offices. Now I'm done, Melissa.
Okay. And I would say that there are actually, for ARSA, there are quite a number of the executive board that do the same thing. Kristen and Robbie are here as well, and appreciate their efforts on behalf of our rural communities as well. So, but if there are any other last minute questions, we've got about 5 minutes before our hour is up, and I'm happy to have you unmute and ask or opine. That's absolutely fine too. All right. Well, hearing none, I'm giving you back 5 minutes. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you in the upcoming legislative session. Reach out if Sean or I can help you. Thanks so much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have